stairs, his fluffy tail waving in self-satisfaction. Billy sighed. What must it be like to be a cat? No worries, no problems. A food bowl always well supplied with tasty morsels, and a place to sleep as close as any bed, sofa, or lap. Gandalf never had to worry about who he was or what his parents were. For Billy, everything he had ever known suddenly been swept away like worthless kitty litter. And now even the floor seemed to crumble under the weight of his burdens. Every thought swirled in a Kansas-sized tornado as he stumbled about in the corridors of his own mind, lost in a carnival maze of mirrors. He turned towards the door, ready to go downstairs and demand an explanation from his parents. But fear of what a confrontation might bring made him pause. He glanced around the room, desperately clinging to images he held dear. On the wall, by the window, hung a pencil sketch. He made with the help of his father when he was first learning to draw. It was a portrait of Merlin, drawn from fantasies of his imagination. Although he had no idea what Merlin actually looked like, the more he stared at the glass-encased sketch, the more familiar the aged face looked, as though an old friend stared back to offer him help and comfort. A pint jar of shark teeth on his desk. The summer before last, he and his dad collected them during their vacation in Venice, Florida. The feeling of swimming in water that once teemed with monster sharks had raised a shiver as they pretended the man-eaters were still lurking just below their dangling toes. A relatively new treasure also sat on the desk, the computer he had received for his birthday. It hadn't taken long to learn how to surf for information on the internet, both for fun and for school projects. Now its presence provided hope. Out of the millions of websites in cyberspace, there had to be stuff about dragons. After hurriedly changing his shirt, he plopped down on his desk chair and began navigating dozens of websites devoted to dragon lore, knights, and damsels, and other ancient legends. The effort of wading through the mass of information dizzied his mind, and with the swirling confusion already fogging his thoughts, he couldn't take any more. Probably 90% of the stuff was just stories people made up. He needed facts. Billy shook his head and closed the browser. With a sigh and a click of his mouse, he switched to his email program. Several new messages popped into his inbox. Some were spam, advertisements, but one looked like a personal note from Mr. Hamilton. He opened the message and read, Mr. Banner, I thoroughly enjoyed conversation with you during our ride today. When I returned to school, I spoke with Dr. Whittier. He agreed to allow you to attend classes tomorrow and clear your record if you will scrub the newly inscribed graffiti on the school's front wall. He planned to have you clean the restroom, but the janitor has already mopped the floor and removed the excess water. In my opinion, we have arrived at a good settlement. If you are sincere about wanting to keep up with your schoolwork, come an hour early tomorrow. I will meet you if you need help to get started with the cleaning duty. I want to be sure you attend the next class. I will be talking about Merlin. Today's lecture notes are in a detached file. Sincerely, Charles Hamilton. Billy read the message again. The ending reference was a Bible verse. He looked on the shelf at the opposite wall and scanned the book's spines. I forgot to read the end. Sincerely, Charles Hamilton. 1 Peter 2:18 and 19. Okay. He didn't use his Bible very often, but once in a while, when his father was out for an overnight trip, he and his mother read a section together and talked about it. He especially liked the stories about angels, Michael, Gabriel, and whatever the other ones were named. He spotted the Bible and slid out the small leather-bound book. After flipping through the pages, he found the passage, Slaves, submit yourself to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because he is conscious of God. Billy smiled. Mr. Hamilton's words seemed to lift a huge burden. The old teacher had a kind heart to go along with his information-packed brain. Now there was a good thought. He could ask Mr. Hamilton questions. After all, he seemed to know what was real and what wasn't when it came to the legends. Maybe he knew something about dragons. With his hands on the home keys, Billy started typing. Dear Mr. Hamilton, I appreciate the ride home today, and I enjoyed our talk about the Arthur legend. There's one part you didn't mention, dragons. Did they really exist? If so, what happened to them? Where can I find more information on dragons? I will be at school 1 hour early, like you said. I'll see you there. Thanks for getting me off suspension. Billy Bannister. He clicked the send button and breathed a sigh, relieved that he had at least done something to solve his nightmare of a mystery. The school bus engine rattled outside. Billy rose from his chair. If Mom and Dad found that he was already home, they would want to know what happened, and he wasn't ready to tell them. He snatched his backpack, headed towards the stairs, but the soft padding of footsteps stopped him cold. Mom was near the bottom of the steps. He ducked away from the stairwell, avoiding her notice. The window would be the better option. He tiptoed back into his room and sneaked towards the wall that faced the street out front. After casting furtive glances all around, he opened the window. Piece of cake, he whispered to himself as he ducked out. With shoes grinding the gritty roof surface, he walked with bent knees to the end of the gutter, his arms extended for balance. The shingles radiated the day's unusual late autumn warmth, and a fresh breeze cooled his dampened skin. When he reached the corner of the roof, he dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms and legs around the drain pipe. This trick was a lot easier when Walter was chasing him during a more carefree time. Now, with all the dragon stuff going on, it seemed like a wet noodle had replaced his spine. Billy took a deep breath, gripped the metal on his shoe soles, and began sliding earthward. On the way down, his finger caught on a jagged pipe joint, and he jerked away in pain. He grabbed the pipe again, his bloodied hand, and rushed his descent, allowing the rough metal to scrape his bare forearms as he shinnied the rest of the way down and landed on his feet. Sucking the wounded finger, he hurried around the house and hustled up the sidewalk to his front door. A sense of guilt weighed down. He couldn't remember ever sneaking around like this, but then again, he had never heard his dad say he had dragon blood before. Trust had buried itself. Everything seemed different now. Billy entered the front door, with his head held high, pretending everything was normal. "I'm home," his mother called from the living room. "We're in here, Billy." He hustled down the hall and turned into the room. Mom sat on the sofa, Dad to her left with a huge book open on his lap. It looked like an ancient Bible, complete with a worn leather binding and yellow parchment pages. Billy wanted to ask about the book, but when his father closed it, he scooted to a chair adjacent to the sofa, glad that his pants were now dry. He sat back, trying to hide his turmoil, at least for now. "What's up, Dad? You're home early." He stared at Billy. His eyes were like fingers, poking and probing for information. "Your mother called me. She wanted me to help take care of a problem." "A problem?" Billy concealed a shiver. "What problem?" "She noticed this morning when you kissed her that your breath was extremely hot." Mom pointed at the welt on her cheek while she continued. "We're guessing you've already noticed it, maybe for quite some time." Billy fidgeted. "Well, He paused, wanting to blurt everything, but something clamped his mouth shut. Go ahead, son, Mom prodded. You can tell us. Billy sighed and looked down at his shoes. Yeah, I've noticed it, especially today. I had a problem in school. I tried to stop Adam Lark from setting off fire sprinklers in the restroom, but I accidentally set them off myself. Dad shifted forward. Set them off yourself? How did that happen? Billy leaned over and began retying his shoes. Well, Adam was putting his lighter up by the sensor, and I tried to blow it out. For some reason, my breath's gotten so hot it must have set off the alarm. When Billy looked up, his throat tightened, and tears welled in his eyes. He firmed his chin and tried to blink away the tears. Mom, what's going on? He turned to his father. Dad? Dad patted the sofa cushion on the left and reopened the book. Sit here. I have something to show you. Billy stepped over and sat down, nestled into the cushion, but keeping his distance. He swallowed hard and gripped his knees as he peered at the book. Dad turned a large, tawny page, revealing dozens of lines of flowing script on the ragged parchment. What do you know about dragons, Billy? Only what I've read in books, like The Hobbit. They're fierce, scaly, flying lizards that can breathe fire. Anything else? Well, they gather treasure, and they're evil. They kill people when things don't go their way. Dad turned another page, this time more slowly. In your mind, do they look something like this? Billy stared at the newly revealed parchment. They displayed a drawing of a knight fighting a dragon, a beautiful depiction of a heated battle. The knight with a drawn sword and an uplifted shield, and the dragon with torrents of and the dragon with torrents of fire blasting the shield. Behind the knight stood a young lady in a white flowing gown, obviously the object of the battle. Although he had never seen the picture before, something about it seemed familiar. It raised a memory of a picture in the principal's office, but there was something more, something personal. Billy nodded, keeping his stare on the artwork. Yeah, something like that. Dad turned another page, revealing several lines of centered text. The handwritten script flowed in nearly flawless curves, not quite calligraphy, but possessing the swirls of an ancient and devoted pen. The letters created odd spellings and indecipherable words. This is a poem, Dad said, written by a man who drew the picture. He was a squire for one of King Arthur's knights. Arthur's knights? Like ones of the Round Table? Well, not quite. This knight was Arthur's fiercest, to be sure, but his bloodlust kept him from securing a seat of nobility. He was forever in pursuit of dragons, to the point of madness. Billy blinked. Dad's words sounded like a fairy tale, like he was telling a bedtime story. So dragons were real? They really did breathe fire and try to kill people like in the picture? Dad's jaw tensed, but his voice stayed calm. Some dragons killed many people, giving all dragons a bad reputation. Arthur commissioned this particular knight to eliminate the species. At the time, Arthur was unaware of the existence of good dragons. Good dragons? Billy looked up from the page, a tight knot growing in his stomach. He squeezed his kneecaps like he was trying to wring out a sponge. So why are you telling me all this? Dad ran his finger across lines of text. To explain it, I'm going to recite this poem for you. It's written in an old version of English, but I translated it and tried to make it rhyme in modern English. The rhymes aren't perfect, but they're pretty close. I memorized my version of it. With dragons slain, my caster craves another beast, another prey. For dragons now wear human skin and roam the earth to spread their sin. My master hunts and never rests. We purge the land and spoil their nests. 'Tis strange to spill the human blood, but dragons hide beneath that hood. He turned the page and back to the picture of the knight and dragon. As Billy stared at it again, the image took over his senses. It seemed to come alive. The eyes of the dragon glowed, pouring out evil as it unleashed its maniacal fury. Billy focused on the eyes. Yes, that was it, the eyes. This artist drew them the same way Billy did when his subject was furious, with the tiny white dots at the center of the pupil. As he scanned the portrait, other similarities became apparent. Human hands, tree leaves, boulders, all reflecting his own style. Not exactly, but close enough to keep him wondering. What could it all mean? Billy finally tore away from the picture's hypnotic effect. He took a deep breath and looked at his father. So what are you trying to say? What does this have to do with my problem? Dad took his own deep breath and set a hand on Billy's thigh. I'm saying that I'm one of those dragons who now wears human skin. An urge to pull away spiked, but Billy sat motionless, staring at the hand on his leg, thinking about its thick hair and imagining it morphing into a hideous claw with scales and razor-sharp talons. His body trembled, and the tremor spread to his arms and legs. When Dad jerked his hand back, Billy tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick and tingly. He finally spat out his thoughts. I already knew that. Mom and Dad looked at each other. Mom spoke up. You knew? How? Billy cringed as he spilled his story. I got suspended because of what happened in the bathroom, so I came home early. I heard you and Dad talking about Dad being a dragon. I climbed down the drain pipe and came in like nothing was wrong. I didn't want you to know about what happened today, at least not right away. I understand, Dad replied without hesitation. Billy blinked at him. You do? If I had heard something like that, I think I'd have run to the nearest insane asylum and checked myself in. Billy laughed under his breath. Something like that did cross my mind. Dad smiled. You showed a lot of courage coming in to talk to us. Billy lowered his head. For some reason, he had a hard time looking into his father's eyes. I don't feel very courageous. Why not? How many other kids have you heard what you just heard? I think you're taking it very well. Billy focused on his hands as they were continued wringing out his kneecaps. The fear seemed so odd. What was he afraid of? His own father, maybe? He faced Dad again. Were you a good dragon? Dad's mouth dropped open for a second, and he cleared his throat. Yes. Yes, of course. So you never killed anyone? Dad slowly closed the book and placed both palms on the dark brown cover. I think we'd better not go any further today. You've got too much to think about as it is. Billy stiffened. Was Dad dodging the question? Did he really kill someone? He rose and turned towards Billy, the mysterious book tucked under his arm. There are literally centuries of stories I could tell you, and the truth goes far deeper than even I can understand. But what you've heard is probably already a 10-ton weight on your mind. I just wanted you to know why your breath is so hot, so you'll understand what's going on. Dad heaved a deep sigh. Sadness seemed to envelop his mood. You're the son of a dragon. I'm not sure how else this truth will be manifested, but you need to take care of your breath. It might bring greater problems than setting off sprinklers in the boys' room. Let's see. Yeah, my character's a little bit close to the mirror. Oh. Move it. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, it'll bring greater problems than setting off sprinklers in the boys' room. He turned to leave, then paused. I have a lot of studying to do before I can give any more advice. There's a certain prophecy that makes me wonder. With that, he left. His footsteps thudded up the stairs. Billy stared at his mother as he rose to his feet. Prophecy? What prophecy? His cheeks warming, he huffed loudly. Dad just told me I'm the son of a dragon. Then he leaves? She rose and extended her arms. Billy stepped back and set a hand over his mouth. As shivers crawled along his skin again, he tried to steel himself. She smiled in a sad sort of way. Tears glistened in her eyes as she stepped forward and pulled Billy into her arms. She hugged him close and rubbed his back tenderly. Billy rested his head on her shoulder, lightly embracing her in return. Her arms seemed to try to squeeze the tremors out of his body. He was trembling from fear or anger. Either way, that insane asylum was starting to sound like a good idea. I think you'll have to wait for your father, she whispered. Like he said, you already have you already have a lot to deal with. I'm sure if he could explain everything now, he would. As she pulled him even closer, warm tears dripped on his shirt. Just remember, she continued, I will always love you, no matter what. Alright, chapter 6. Let's see, I'm gonna flip my clock here, but I can keep track of the time. 10:44, okay. Or my time, at least. Alright, chapter 6, Darkness and Light. Alright, let us continue the story. Chapter 6, Darkness and Light. Light of the dawning day illuminated the office, allowing sunbeams to paint harsh stripes of yellowish white on the principal's desk. Countless dust particles danced on the multi-level stage, riding tiny air currents on an irresistible track towards a glowing computer monitor that grabbed the miniature imp's large sticky fly paper. Dr. Whittier squinted at the image, trying to decipher the internet page through the reflected glare. He finally gave up and rose to shut the blinds. Just as he pulled the string and the slats clacked, the desk phone rang. He sprung back and grabbed the handset. Whittier. I couldn't find the address, just the state. She was in the Montana foster system. Montana? Dr. Whittier said. Where after that? West Virginia. A couple of short-term foster homes were there before the current one. I'll need hard copies pronto. Fax the whole report. Include the birth certificate and recent addresses. Send those first. You got it. Coming your way. Whittier hung up the phone and limped over to his fax machine. Within seconds, the printer began churning out pages. When the first two dropped into the bin, Whittier snatched them up and walked slowly to his desk, reading Bonnie's foster care history along the way. He sat in his chair, picked up Bonnie's photograph from her school file, and held it next to the photo in her Montana records. Although the girl in the earlier photo was a bit younger, they all were clearly the same person. He read the name on the birth certificate, Bonnie Connor. So, he whispered to himself, your name was changed to Silver when you were placed in the Montana foster care system. He scanned the report for the earliest date. March 19th. Whittier pulled the desk drawer and withdrew a personal planter booklet from the bottom of the stack. He opened it to March and found Connor scrawled in a box near the beginning of the month. He tossed the booklet back into the drawer and shut it. Could it be? Was Pawnee a true mongrel, or was she just an adopted human? Whittier picked up the fax records again and studied every entry. If his theory was correct, why did Hortana have her put into foster care? Why didn't she cover her tracks better? And if Bonnie really was born to Dr. and Mrs. Connor, why did the good doctor keep her hidden? Whittier drummed his fingers on the desk. Was Bonnie transferred to West Virginia, to Castlewood of all places, the same city where they had tracked Bannister down after all these years? He set his hand on the phone. They had to find out. Uh, do, do, do. Where were we? Whittier drummed his fingers on the desk. Why was Bonnie transferred to West Virginia? To Castlewood, of all places. The same city where they had tracked Bannister down after all these years. He set his hand on the phone. They had to find out. If she really was a mongrel, then it was no wonder that she could entrance him, little sorceress. He grabbed the handset and punched in Olga's number. "What's up?" Olga asked. "We might have to mobilize. Where are you?" "Still monitoring the Bannister house. That can wait. Meet me in the schoolyard in 1 hour, and bring a rope. I need you to help me search a teenage girl here. If she bolts, you can chase her better than I can." "All right. Will you have the blade?" "No need for that. Just get here in 1 hour, right before classes start. I'll meet you in the yard." Whittier hung up the phone, returned to the window, and opened the blinds to the rising sun. He raised a hand to his brow to shade his eyes. A solitary male student strolled to the sidewalk toward the school entrance. Under one arm he carried a tube, maybe a rolled-up poster. The other he swung a mop bucket in time with his gait. The coolness of November morning was evident in the boy's choice of dress. A thick pullover sweater and gloves. A dark bank of clouds had moved in from the west, and it threatened to blot out the dawn's attempts to warm the day. West Virginia's island summer reprieve was coming to an end. Whittier smiled. Billy Bannister had arrived, which meant that Hamilton was probably already at the school as well. Maybe Mr. Hamilton was right. Maybe Billy was a responsible kid after all. When Billy disappeared around the corner, Whittier looked back at the file on his desk. There wasn't enough information about Bonnie. At least not enough to warrant the ultimate penalty. Of course, if all proved true, sweet innocent girl or not, he wouldn't hesitate to perform his sacred duty. Still, there were too many unanswered questions. He closed from the fresh hot tea toward his nose, perking his senses. Hey, it's a man after my own heart. Tea. Tea is epic, am I right? My beverage of choice, too. Through half-dollar-sized lenses on his reading glasses, Charles peered at the odd script and turned the ancient pages thick and noisy, more like cardboard than paper. Every once in a while, he picked up a pen and a yellow pad that he kept close at hand, and scratched a few notes. Meditations that would be intelligible only to him. At one point in his study, he opened his Bible to Job, chapter 41, and suspended his pen over the pad as he read. Who can sniff out his outer armor? Who can come within his double mail? Who can open the doors of his face? Round his teeth there is terror. His strong scales are his pride. Shut up as with a tight seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils smoke goes forth, as from a boiling pot, and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes forth from his mouth. Charles jotted down a few notes and closed the Bible, smiling. If that's not a dragon, I don't know what is. As if the clock on the wall silently approached 7:30, another teacher walked in and greeted him. Soon, several teachers had arrived and chatted nearby, sipping coffee and munching on various donuts and pastries. Charles sighed. His study time was winding down. He turned another page and scanned it quickly. Not finding anything more to record, he closed the book and began gathering his collection into a stack. That's quite a load you have there, Mr. Hamilton. He turned. Dr. Whittier stood nearby. Yes, he replied, returning to the books. I'm preparing for today's lecture. Dr. Whittier picked up the top volume and examined the cover. What's this? The Knights of Camelot? He slid another book off the stack. The Age of Dragons? Yes, we're doing a section on the King Arthur legend. Dr. Whittier returned the books to the stack. Why are you studying that in a history class? Do you believe the legends? What I believe matters little. I am able to mix indisputable with the marginal and explain the difference. What matters is that my students are interested. In fact, I acquired these books because a student asked me for information. Dr. Whittier set his palm on the top book and rubbed the fingers on the binding. You got these from the library? I didn't know that Castlewood had volumes like these. They're not from a library. I drove to Cumberland last night to visit a friend who loaned them to me from his private collection. I doubt any library in our region would carry books of such an antiquity. No doubt you're right. Mr. Whittier rubbed the cover again and examined the dust on his hand. By the way, what did the student ask about? He asked about dragons. Dr. Whittier's brow shot upward, but his voice stayed calm. Dragons? Who asked about dragons? Charles waved a finger toward the wall where Billy's school building caricature leaned. The very same Mr. Bannister who created this beautiful poster for our school. I met him this morning to give him his assignments and to collect his artwork. The same hands that sketched this marvelous portrait are now scrubbing the walls outside. As I told you, he is not troublemaker. He is not the troublemaker he appeared to be yesterday. He is a bright and talented young man. Dr. Whittier stared at the floor for a moment, obviously deep in thought. He finally muttered, So Bannister asked, did he? He looked again at Charles. And you drove all the way to Cumberland just to answer the question? Charles pushed his glasses down on his nose and peered over them at the principal. Dr. Whittier, do you know how rare it is these days for a student to go out of his way specifically ask for information? I intend to do my part and give the very best answer I can. The principal slid a hand into his pocket. As you should, of course. I'm glad to hear it. But what about dragons did Billy Bannister want to know? Whether or not they really once existed. And what have you found? I have my own opinions, of course, but I think it's important to provide my students with good reference material. Charles looked back at the books and set a finger on the third one from the top. This volume has several amazing dragon stories. Oh, that's right, he's British. This volume has several amazing dragon stories with evidence that's quite good, but I've found no truly first-hand accounts, Dr. Whittier noted, as I would expect in books like these. Charles turned back to the principal and narrowed his eyes. Do you know of other sources? Yes. I have, in fact, a number of journals in my private collection in my office, including my own journal, in which I have recorded an interesting history of knights. I'll show them to you if you would like. I should like that very much. Dr. Whittier gestured with a curled finger. Come along, then. Charles left his books and cup of tea behind. The two men exited the teacher's lounge. They walked side by side down the hall, nodding at the teachers and students who had arrived early. My books are copies, of course, Dr. Whittier said, but they were originally penned at the time of the dragons by actual knights. He stopped and faced Charles. I've heard you're a religious man, Hamilton. Surely you know the Bible speaks of dragons. Charles squared his shoulders. I am indeed a religious man, a Christian of the old school, and I am aware of the Bible's references to dragons. Good, good, Dr. Whittier started walking again, his limp slowing his pace. Then you should know that dragons are minions of the devil. Satan himself is called the dragon. Charles caught up and walked at the principal's side. He is called that, I am sure, because of his fierceness and his determination to conquer. That doesn't mean all dragons, if there ever were such beasts, possess the devil's nature. Surely using a dragon to personify evil is symbolic. First they existed, God created them just as he did all other creatures. Corruption is not inherent, it is self-inflicted. Dr. Whittier opened his office door. Once you read my sources, perhaps you will be persuaded otherwise. When they entered, Dr. Whittier ushered Charles into a large walk-in closet, probably a supply room at one time. Built-in shelves lined the walls. Simple planks at eye level and above, braced with metal brackets and tightly packed with books. Freestanding book cabinets stood side by side on the flat carpet, each one stuffed to overflowing. Dr. Whittier stared at the books, as if admiring a beautiful work of art. I will allow you to browse my collection, Charles. Trusting that you are a man of high intellect and spiritual discernment, I also trust that you will come to the same conclusion about dragons that I have. He pushed a protruding book back in place. I have to go in a moment. I have some business this morning with Bonnie Silver. Do you know her? Charles smiled. Yes, she's a delightful lass, to be sure. Have you ever noticed anything unusual about her? Well, she has quite an attachment to her backpack, but I think everyone is aware of that. No, besides that, anything non-physical, her talents, her intellect. Charles studied the principal's expression, curious and probing. Something about his manner seemed less than professional, but providing superficial information couldn't cause any harm. I've noticed that her written work is profound and entertaining, and her vocabulary is college level. She's also more polite and charming than most girls her age. Dr. Whittier mumbled, Yes, charming. When a secretary entered the office, he leaned close to Charles and spoke in a hushed tone. Do you know why she moved to Castlewood? She lives in a foster home on the south side. Charles responded in kind, keeping his voice low. No, in fact, I concluded a lesson on heritage and hometowns. I remembered that she remained very quiet. I knew she was an orphan, so I refrained from asking about her parents, but I did ask her where she lived before coming to Castlewood, and why she moved here. What did she say? I will never forget her reply. She said, I prefer to maintain my privacy regarding this matter. Of course, I permitted her silence. Privacy? Dr. Whittier's voice dropped even lower. Do you think she's been abused? That thought had not occurred to me. I think it's more likely that she has faced tragedy. After all, she is an orphan. Perhaps the loss of her parents is still a raw wound, and she doesn't want that topic raised. Yes, good point. Tragedy is a more likely reason. After several seconds, he looked at Charles with a probing stare. Hamilton, you look strangely familiar to me. You remind me of an old acquaintance of mine from a long time ago. Oh? Until recently, I've lived in England all my life. Have you ever been there? Yes, many times, but my acquaintance is long dead. I'm sure it's just my imagination. Yet I found the resemblance to be quite striking. Perhaps I'm a distant relation to this acquaintance of yours." Hoping to end the conversation, Charles pulled several books from the shelf and collected them in his arms. "Dr. Whittier, I will supply you with a list of volumes that I have borrowed and return them upon concluding my research. I regret that I am unable to assist you any further concerning Miss Silver." Dr. Whittier patted Charles on the back. "Believe it or not, you have." Alright, next is Chapter 7. Let me see the time. 11:21. Okay, yeah, still got time. Yeah, the book reading really dries out your throat. Yuck. Alright. Chapter 7. Bonnie's Secrets. Bonnie walked towards the school at a quick pace, her heart feeling light and alive in the crisp, sweet-smelling air. Her walk was a long one, more than 2 miles from her foster home. Sure, the bus would have been easier, but after the first couple of rides, the teasing became too much to take. On a lovely morning like this, however, the long walk seemed like nothing more than a refreshing stroll. Earlier, she had forsaken her braid, choosing to let her hair flow in the fresh breeze. Everything seemed perfect. Maybe today would be better than yesterday. After the tussle with Adam, it wouldn't take much to achieve that goal. When the school came into view, Bonnie slowed her pace and gazed at the yard. From all directions, dozens of students streamed towards the main building. A few arrived on foot from nearby neighborhoods. Many more stepped out the various minivans and sport utility vehicles that had lined up inside the school gate. In the circular driveway, a yellow school bus fed the sidewalk, with one tromping backpacker after another. The first truly cold day of the season had brought smiling faces and even some playful rowdiness among the young males, who pushed and punched each other as they passed groups of young females. Bonnie walked into the crowd, listening to their chatter. The cliques gathered here and there, consulting on the latest gossip and cooing over the bright new sweaters and hats, sported by both friends and enemies alike. While the less popular students strolled alone, looking for an acquaintance or two. My throat. Someone to share the joy of the fresh new morning. Ugh. Bonnie suppressed a frown. She was... my goodness, what's up with my throat? She was one of the loners. No surprise. Who would want to befriend a strange girl like her? Someone who never took off her huge backpack, never participated in sports, and never let people come too close. And never let people come too close. She was weird, and everyone knew it. Hey, Bonnie. She pivoted towards the voice. Carrying a stack of books in front, Jennifer Houston stood with a group of girls huddled on the sidewalk near the bus loop. What's up, Jennifer? Jennifer gestured with her head. Come over and join us. As Bonnie walked that way, she focused on Jennifer's sweater sleeve, with forest reds and yellows running through it in a mottled pattern. Her arm resembled an autumn branch, showing off its yearly splendor. Bonnie glanced down at her faded blue sweatshirt, but only for a moment. The temptation to feel sorry for herself was fleeting and easily ignored. Instead, she chose to relish the warmth of its inner fleece as she rubbed softly, as it rubbed softly against her skin. When she stalked next to Jennifer, she smiled. Yes? Jennifer's own smiled, revealed a row of bright white teeth behind rosy lip gloss. I heard Billy's back at school today. The girls all stared, some wearing smirks that seemed less than friendly. Bonnie slid her thumbs behind the front straps of her backpack and used them to rest her arms. Really? I heard he got suspended for 3 days. Jennifer nodded towards the school. Have a look. Bonnie turned that way. At the corner of the building, Billy knelt, scrubbing a light gray stucco area on the school's foundation. Sweat dripped from his hair and face, in spite of the cool air. Most of the section had been scored clean, but a few faded black marks remained. Bonnie's heart sank. The poor guy. He was working so hard and all alone. It wasn't his fault, you know, she said, turning back to the girls. Adam Lark lied about him. Jennifer wrinkled her nose and spoke in sing-song. Well, I heard that a certain Bonnie Silver stood up for her boyfriend in front of the principal, then later decked Adam for trying to get him in trouble. That's not why I punched him. Adam was. You admit to punching him. Jennifer lifted her brow. When you Christian girls decide to get some action, you don't mess around. A lump welled in Bonnie's throat. Some action? What do you mean? You and Billy Bannister, of course. Jennifer took Bonnie's hand and patted it. It's all right, Bonnie. Nobody believed your purity act anyway. And besides, Billy's cute and he's a nice guy. Walking hand in hand with him would look a lot better than trudging around alone all the time, I mean. Everyone knows you're an orphan, but you don't have to act like one. Bonnie drew her hand away. As the anger rose, she steeled her body to keep it from shaking. You're way off base, Jennifer. I just didn't want Billy to get in trouble, so I told the principal the truth. There's no action going on. Oh? Maybe you could persuade me, Jennifer gestured towards her friends, who now chatted amongst themselves like clucking hens. But a lot of other girls won't be so easily convinced. You know how gossip spreads. Bonnie crossed her arms. Yes, I know exactly how gossip spreads. Well, honey, you're the one who got it started. Jennifer blew a kiss and turned towards her friends. As a sob tried to erupt, Bonnie swallowed hard to quell it. There was no denying the pain. Jennifer's poisoned sarcasm stung. Just yesterday, she had been nice, but now that she was with her friends, she had transformed into an acid-tongued gossip queen. Bonnie turned towards the school building. Billy sat on the ground, resting and wiping his brow with his sleeve. He needed a boost, but if she went over and talked to him, Jennifer and her cronies would notice, and their tongues would start wagging again. She glanced over her shoulder. Yes, they were watching. But did it matter what they thought? She shook her head. Not one bit. She marched to the corner of the building and spoke in a lively tone. Good morning, Billy. He looked up. Oh, hi, Bonnie, right? Yes, Bonnie Silver. She scanned his features. Jennifer was right about one thing. With his small button nose, strong chin, and sparkling hazel eyes, he was definitely cute. But there was something profound, a deeper quality that radiated from within. It glimmered in the principal's office, but it seemed stronger now. That looks like a hard job. What are you doing? Let's see, why are you doing it? I got suspended. Dr. Whittier said he'd wipe it from my record if I cleaned the wall. I'm almost done, but I have to rest for a minute. Bonnie reached into a bucket of sudsy water and grabbed the brush. Let me get the last spot for you. She knelt and scrubbed the wall, pushing hard to wipe the stubborn marks. As she worked, she looked again at the girls. They were still watching, chittering like juvenile squirrels. But who cared what they thought? Let them gossip. They were the ones who needed help, not her. After a couple of minutes of scrubbing, the marks disappeared. There, she said as she rose. It's done. Still sitting, Billy looked up at her again. Thanks. That was a tough stain. Bonnie dropped the brush into the bucket and wiped her soapy hands on her sweatshirt. You must have been tired. My arms were fresh. She reached down. Need a lift? Billy grasped her wrist. When Bonnie hoisted him to his feet, he brushed his hands on his sweaty shirt, looking at her out of the corner of his eye. She was strong, much stronger than she appeared. Pretty impressive. He grabbed his sweater from the ground and pulled it over his head and fluffed his matted hair. A chilly breeze swept through, evaporating sweat and raising a shiver, a good shiver. And now that the thick sweater wrapped his body. Thanks again. That's twice you've helped me out. A deeper voice broke in. Well, well, Mr. Bannister. I see you've a friend here to help you. Billy turned. Dr. Whittier stood a few feet away next to a hefty, broad-shouldered woman. I scrubbed most of it, he said, but Bonnie did help me get the last spot. I know. I saw you working, and I've already taken care of your record. Actually, I've been waiting for Miss Silver. Bonnie's eyes widened. For me? Yes. We have something important to discuss. Someone has reported that you keep contraband substances in your backpack. I understand the sensitive nature of your privacy concerns, so I asked Miss Olga to assist me in searching you, starting with your pack. Okay. Bonnie glanced at Billy, a look that begged to help her out. He cleared his throat and stepped forward. Bonnie would never keep anything like that in her backpack. Right, Bonnie? Of course I wouldn't. Olga walked towards Bonnie with a hand extended. Then you have nothing to hide. She grasped Bonnie's arm and guided her towards the rear of the building, Dr. Whittier at their side. Bonnie looked back at Billy, terror in her eyes. The school bell rang, making him flinch. He glanced at the students as they headed towards the building. What could he do? Could they just take her like that? The moment they disappeared around the corner, Billy followed and watched from behind a bush. As Bonnie thrashed to free herself, Olga wrapped her in both arms, squeezing her chest to chest. Bonnie screamed, but her cries drowned in the woman's coat. When Dr. Whittier reached for Bonnie's backpack, Billy bolted from his hiding place, yelling, "Stop! Leave her alone!" Dr. Whittier pivoted towards Billy. "Billy, you have to stay out of this." Billy rushed to Olga, his mouth on her arm, and he blew on it as hard as he could. Yow! She threw the wounded arm upward. Billy wrenched Bonnie from her grasp and pushed her out of reach. With a lightning-fast hand, Olga snatched Billy's wrist. He twisted his arm, trying to break free. "Run, Bonnie, run!" Bonnie scrambled a few yards away, then looked back, her mouth dropping open. "Go after her," Dr. Whittier barked. "You know I can't run. Give me the boy." When Olga thrust Billy into Dr. Whittier's arms, Bonnie took off. Olga chased her, sprinting like an Olympic athlete. Much faster than her stocky body seemed capable of. By the time Bonnie rounded the corner, Olga had gained a lot of ground. Billy gritted his teeth. The chase wouldn't last long. They had run toward a back alley that led to the cafeteria. Being a new student, Bonnie probably didn't know that the cafeteria doors stayed locked until lunchtime. There was no other way out. While they waited, Dr. Whittier loosened his grip, leaving his hands on Billy's shoulders with just enough firmness to keep him in place. Soon, Olga dashed around the corner, holding her hands up. She disappeared. Dr. Whittier limped towards her, pulling Billy along. They followed Olga to the alley, empty except for a head-high dumpster, cafeteria trash lying around. Old aluminum cans, an empty milk crate, and a few banana peels. "Did you check the dumpster?" Dr. Whittier asked. Olga nodded. "Nothing there." Dr. Whittier shoved Billy toward Olga. Hold him. Billy looked at her arm. Maybe he could give her another blast of superheated breath and run away. But then he might not learn what happened to Bonnie. Dr. Whittier rose to tiptoes and peered into the dumpster. Empty. Olga scowled. Didn't you believe me? Dr. Whittier searched the alley's black top surface, limping like a wounded dog. I wasn't expecting to find her. I'm looking for... Ah, here it is. He picked up a large piece of blue and black denim, her backpack. He unfolded the material and displayed a large hole, a fabric gap, that rested on Bonnie's back. Billy squinted at the torn pack. What was Dr. Whittier's point? What do I do with this one? Olga asked. The little rascal bit me. Dr. Whittier extended a hand. Let me see the wound. Olga let Billy go for a moment, but the two adults blocked the only escape from the alley. Oh, let me see the wound. Okay. Dr. Whittier examined Olga's arm, then glared at Billy. That's not a bite, he snarled. That's a burn. No wonder you're in cahoots with the little demon witch. He reached towards Billy, raging fury in his eyes. Billy leaned to run, but something shoved him from behind. Instead of falling, he rose, surging higher and higher into the air. Pressure stabbed his chest and under his arms. As Billy struggled to breathe, Dr. Whittier and Olga shrank below. Whittier shaking a fist and shouting, his words scattered in the wind, raising reminders of the recent dream. Maybe he was dreaming now. Within seconds, the scene below disappeared in a cloud. Looking for the source of pressure, Billy shifted his eyes. Two arms embraced him, each holding firmly the wrist of the other, making an interlocking grip around his chest. The sleeves were pushed up to the elbows, exposing lean arms, smooth, creamy white skin. The sudden changes gave him no time to feel any fear, but now a queasy sensation brewed in his stomach. Maybe this wasn't a dream after all. Are you all right? A familiar voice asked. Bonnie? Billy tried to turn his head to see behind him, but his body dangling, the effort was hopeless. Stop wriggling. You'll make me drop you. Drop me? Reality flooded Billy's senses. He looked down and saw nothing but the top of the cloud bank that had rolled in that morning. Bonnie? What's going on? He gasped for breath and thrashed his arms and legs in useless attempts to steady his mind and body. Be still. I can't hold you if you do that. You're too heavy. Her arms grasped him even more tightly, and their strength settled his nerves, though he couldn't calm his voice. Bonnie? Are we flying? Just a second. Something pressed this against the soles of Billy's feet, and Bonnie's arms loosened around his chest. He swiveled his head, looking from side to side. Clouds floated all around. I'm standing, but the clouds are still below us. We're on Mount Hardin. The peak is sticking up through the clouds. Billy turned towards her voice. Bonnie sat on a large boulder. She held a palm on her chest and took several slow, deep breaths before smiling and letting out a quiet laugh. You're pretty heavy, you know that? Billy stepped towards her, then halted. How did you... What did you... Finally, he set his hands on the sides of his head. What's going on here? Bonnie stared intently at Billy. As if growing out of nothingness, two enormous wings spread behind her, decorated with a light brown hue that resembled rustic gold. The wings flapped slowly, waving towards Billy as if in friendship. Each wing was at least as large as Bonnie, rippled with sinews throughout, a massive a mainstay extending from her back all the way to the furthest tip. Sunlight filtered through the higher circas and shone through the thin membranes of her wings, making them brighten into honey-glazed shimmer. with her blonde streaked hair flowing in the breeze, and her flawless innocence shining through. Her appearance was like that of a seated angel, her winged silhouette striking a portrait of Michael himself. She was stunningly beautiful. 1,000 thoughts scrambled Billy's wits, but he couldn't just stare at her. He had to say something. Your wings are amazing. Amazing? She tilted her head and blinked as if surprised. Not hideous? Not at all. Far from it. You look great, really. Thank you. Bonnie leaped off the boulder and fluttered to the ground. As her wings folded behind her, she walked to Billy, rose to tiptoes, and kissed him on the cheek. And thank you for saving my life. Billy set a pair of fingers on his anointed cheek. You're welcome, but I didn't save your life. I just kept Dr. Whittier from snooping in your backpack. Bonnie laughed under her breath. And now you know what I was hiding. But I was in such a hurry. I didn't have time to pick up the backpack. I had to fly to the roof before Olga came around the corner. Her wings opened again, this time reaching around the corner, around her, and coming within inches of Billy's ears. He smiled, although she seemed almost alien. Her disarming manner eased his mind. She could have had 3 eyes and 4 antennae, and it wouldn't have mattered. Yeah, cool escape, and I can understand why you don't want anyone to see your wings. Bonnie peered down the mountainside as if trying to look through the clouds. Not just anyone. Now that I know who Dr. Whittier is, he's the worst one to find out. Billy looked towards the sky. Nothing lay in view, but a steep grassy knoll, strewn with rocks and shrouded in mist. Who Dr. Whittier is? What do you mean? Bonnie faced Billy again, her eyes flaring as she spoke in rapid spurts. I was listening from the roof. I couldn't believe it when I heard about how you burned that woman. My mother told me about your father, but I never thought I'd find someone else like me. Another dragon kid, I mean. When I first saw you that day in the principal's office, I knew there was something different about you. And then you were scrubbing that wall, and we were so close together, I could feel it. Anyway, when Dr. Whittier called me a demon witch, he gave himself away. He has to be a slayer. Demon witch is what slayers call the females. A slayer? What's that? A dragon slayer. Your parents have told you about dragon slayers, haven't they? Well, no. Bonnie's face contorted. But you are a dragon, aren't you? Billy shoved his hands into his pockets and glanced towards the knoll again. Yes, I guess so. I just found out yesterday. Bonnie looked him in the eye. You mean you've known for only 1 day? I overheard my parents talking about it. Billy shrugged and turned away. Then they told me, but they didn't say much. So your father's the dragon, right? Right. At least that's what he said. But how did you know? I'll tell you later. Bonnie took his arm and pulled him around to face again. Do you have any dragon's traits besides breathing fire? Well, it isn't really fire breathing, Billy said, his hands still in his pockets. My breath's just real hot. Bonnie tilted her head upward. Then it's probably just now developing. That must be why your parents waited for so long to tell you. She looked again at Billy and brought the tip of a wing into her hand. My wings started growing when I was 5 years old. My mother had to tell me what was going on. So you've been flying ever since you were 5? No. They didn't get big enough until about 3 years ago. I practiced flying on cloudy, moonless nights when no one could see me. But after my mother was killed, The color suddenly drained from Bonnie's face, and her wings shuddered. What's wrong? She grabbed his arm with a tight squeeze. Dr. Whittier. He's a dragon slayer. Right, you just told me that. Her voice grew frantic. But he knows where you live. He's probably on his way there already. What will he do? He'll stop at nothing to kill your father. That's chapter 7. Let's see what time. Billy paced frantically. I have to call home. I have to get home. Bonnie spread her wings and grabbed Billy's shirt, halting his pacing. I'll fly there right now. Where's your house? On Cordell Road, 1545. Cordell Road? Bonnie shook her head. I don't know where that is. Billy stopped and drew a quick map in a dirt patch. It's 1 mile northwest of the main highway, from the exit where the Shell station is. He rose and turned slowly, searching for a landmark through the mist. Over there, he said, pointing. The highway is just down the slope from where that clump of trees sticks out. Follow it northwest for about a mile. That's where the exit is. Bonnie surveyed the murky landscape. If I fly below the clouds to find that highway, I'll scare the whole town, and I still might not be able to find your house. But if you stay above the clouds, Billy said, you won't be able to tell which way is which. Bonnie peered into the valley once more. Where did you say your house is? Show me again. Billy pointed while Bonnie circled behind him and looked over his shoulder. See where that cloud puffs up and turns white, I think? With a sudden thrust, Billy lifted off the ground, his feet nearly leaving his shoes behind. I'm heading that way, Bonnie called. Just tell me where to go. Billy grunted. Not again. This time Bonnie's arms wrapped around his body near his waist, tightly enough to make his heart pound against her arm as it pressed under his rib cage. The uplifting pressure pushed out every breath he tried to draw in, but he managed to talk in gasping bursts. Bear right. How much? 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock? Billy extended his arm in the proper direction, but the move made him slip through an inch through Bonnie's grasp. He jerked his hand and clutched Bonnie's arms. I get it now, 2 o'clock. She veered to the right. Can you see? Should I fly lower? Higher? You're fine. Now that Billy had his wits about him, the realization of complete airborne helplessness rattled his nerves. But Bonnie's calm tone and her uncommonly strong arms kept him from panicking. With the fate of his parents the highest priority, he concentrated on his task, finding his house, and fast. He strained to see through the clouds, to no avail. He would have to rely on his sense of direction to get them somewhere close. After a few more commands to correct their direction, he shouted, I think we're right over it. Okay, I'm going to make a fast drop so no one will see us. Get ready. How do I get... He dropped. Every ounce of dangling weight abruptly reversed direction. As they plummeted through the clouds, white mist dampening his face. He blinked as the droplets struggled to keep his eyes open. The moment they fell under the clouds, Billy looked up at Bonnie and shouted, We're clear! Her wings stretched out again, grabbing the air like a muscular parachute. The painful catch under Billy's ribcage returned. Bonnie's arms felt like steel clamps, squeezing his gut into his esophagus. Within seconds, familiar housetops came into view. They had descended over his neighborhood, right above a nearby backyard. Land here, he grunted. Bonnie glided down the leaf-covered yard and released Billy. His feet hit first. Then he rolled into a somersault before sitting upright. He scrambled to his feet and hustled towards Bonnie, who was running out her momentum after her landing. He took off his sweater and handed it to her. Here, put this on. Great, thanks. After helping her pull it over his head, he guided the bottom hem over her wings, using one hand to fold her wings as flat as possible. They felt smooth and leathery, not the same as the velvety texture of her arms. No, the wings were more primitive and wild, with tactile friction that seemed to grip his skin as he rubbed across their surface. They smelled of an outdoors freedom, of horses and saddles, or work belts and new boots. Although he had to touch her wings in multiple places, she seemed to feel no shyness about it. When he finished, she turned towards him. "Is this your yard?" "No." He pointed to his right. "About 5 or 6 houses away, but no worries. I don't think anyone's home here during the day." "Good. What's our next move?" "Let's stay behind the houses and sneak up to mine from the back in case Dr. Whittier's already there." She nodded. "Lead the way." Bending low, they hustled from yard to yard, scaling chain-link fences along the way. When they vaulted the final fence, Billy crouched in his backyard and signaled for Bonnie to join him. When they vaulted over the final fence, Billy crouched in his backyard and signaled for Bonnie to join him. When she did, he looked at his house, a small 2-story dwelling in front of half an acre lot. All was quiet. Too quiet. Had Dr. Whittier already come? Maybe he held his parents captive inside, or worse. Billy whispered, "Let's go." With Bonnie following, he crept up the porch steps, crouched in front of a window, and peeked in. His mother sat at the kitchen table, looking at a pad of paper, a pen in hand, probably working on payroll. "Looks clear," he whispered to Bonnie. "Let's do this calmly. We don't want to scare her." Bonnie nodded. "Got it. I'm ready." Billy opened the door and walked in. "Hi, Mom." She looked from her work, blinking. "Billy? Why are you home so early?" Bonnie walked out from behind Billy. "Hello, Mrs. Bannister." Mom's eyes opened wide, and she smiled. "Who's this young lady?" "Mom, this is Bonnie Silver. Listen, there's no time to talk. We have to get out of here." He scanned the room, but found no signs of his father. "Is Dad home?" "No. He had to run to the airport when to the hardware store. He'll be a while." Her smile faded. "Billy, what's wrong?" "A dragon slayer is coming." Billy's voice trembled, but he couldn't help it. "At least we think he is, and he could be here any minute." Mom jumped to her feet, eyes ablaze. "Dragon slayer? Who?" Billy took her hand and tried to lead her toward the front door. "Never mind, we have to hurry." She pulled back and pushed him in toward a chair. "Sit down and start explaining now." Billy sat while Bonnie slid into a chair next to his. He took a deep breath and tried to speak calmly. "My principal is a dragon slayer, and since we're both dragons, he's coming after us. We have to get out of here." "We're both dragons?" Mom pointed at herself. "What do you mean? I'm not a dragon." Before Billy could answer, Bonnie rose and pulled off the borrowed sweater, carefully guiding it over her head. Her wings spread out, and in the enclosed space they seemed even more magnificent than ever. They shielded the overhead light and cast a shadow over Billy and his mother. "I am," Bonnie said softly. Mom raised a shaking hand to her mouth. "Dear God in heaven, you are one." Bonnie touched Mom's shoulder. "Now, please, we really have to go." "I have to get the box." Mom hurried to the room and thumped up the stairs. "Box?" Bonnie asked Billy. "I don't know, but I'd better see if I can help." He leaped up the stairs as Bonnie followed after him. "I'll keep watch down here." Billy caught up with his mother, just as she came out of her bedroom, carrying a large cardboard box, its size covered by layers of duct tape. Billy slid his arms under the load. "Let me carry that." "Thank you. I have to get one more thing, and we'll put it all in the Volks." She hurried to another room, returned seconds later with a large book under her arm, probably the same book Dad had earlier. "Okay, let's get going." The two rushed down the stairs. Bonnie stood in front of the room, holding back the edge of the curtain as she peeked out the front window. She had put on the sweater back on, but her folded wings made obvious lumps on her back. "Looks safe so far." When Mom opened the door, they hustled to the driveway where their yellow Volkswagen Beetle sat. "We'll put the box and book behind the front passenger seat," Mom said. "It'll be a little tight, but Bonnie should be able to fit behind the driver." "I hope it decides to start okay this time," Billy said. "It had better." Mom opened the car door and placed the book on the back seat. I'll write a note for your father, in case I can't get him on his phone. We'll go to the airport to try to catch him before he leaves." She hurried to the house and disappeared through the door. Bonnie climbed on into the back seat. She and Billy set the box next to her on top of the book. Something rattled up the road. Billy withdrew from the car and looked that way. Walter pedaled a bike toward them, sweat plastering his shirt and chest, pumped his legs furiously. "Walter!" Billy called. "What's wrong?" Walter screeched to a halt and propped his elbows on the handlebars while catching his breath. "I borrowed Frank's bike. Rode all the way. Here." He took a deep breath and spoke more easily. "How do you get back so fast?" "I left quite a while ago. What happened?" "Haven't you heard? A bunch of kids at school saw a huge bat creature carry a kid away. It flew up into the clouds with him kicking underneath. I saw it too. Right before it disappeared, everyone was pointing. So I just looked up, and there it was." Billy sneaked a look at Bonnie. She hunkered down, peering over the car's open window. All the girls screamed. Walter continued, and even some of the guys. Everyone ran for their lives. Dr. Whittier was out there, limping toward the parking lot. But two moms grabbed him, screaming like banshees about their missing kids. They wouldn't let him go. Some parents were still dropping off kids, and they were going nuts, yelling at them to get back in the car. Frank got a ride home with Jackson. That's why I took his bike. Billy looked at the street, void of cars. "So why is he not here yet?" Walter followed Billy's glance. "Who's not here? Frank?" "Never mind." Billy sat a hand on Walter's shoulder and looked him in the eye. "Listen, Walter. Do me a huge favor. Stick around here, but stay out of sight. If my dad comes home, tell him we went to the airport, and he has to come meet us right away. But if Dr. Whittier shows up, make sure he doesn't see you." "Dr. Whittier? Why would he come here? You didn't swamp the bathroom again, did you?" "No." Trying to stay calm, Billy took a deep breath. "Just do it, okay? If my dad doesn't get here in, say, 30 minutes, you can go home, alright?" Sure, Billy. But aren't you wondering about the bat creature?" "Don't worry about the bat creature. She won't hurt you." Walter's face lit up. "She? You know the bat creature? Cool. Can you show her to me?" Billy groaned. "Not now. Just wait for my dad, okay? It's a matter of life and death." Walter raised his hands. Okay. You know a female bat creature that flies away with school kids for no good reason, and you don't want to let me in on it. I understand." "Makes perfect sense to me." He looked down the road again, then back at Billy. "What if your dad asks why you need him?" Billy scratched his head. What should Walter say? "Walter," Bonnie said, leaning forward from the back seat and speaking through the window, "tell him this. A dark night is coming quickly." Walter cocked his head, his eyes narrowing. "Why is Bonnie here?" "You know Bonnie?" Billy asked. "Everyone knows about Bonnie backpack." He took a step towards the car. "She's not wearing it." "Never mind that. Now are you going to tell me? Now, what are you going to tell my father?" "I'll tell him that it's going to get dark early tonight." Billy grabbed Walter's shoulders. "No, listen. A dark night is coming quickly." "Exactly like that. Got it?" "A dark night is coming quickly. Got it." Walter blinked. "But I thought it was going to be a full moon tonight," he said the other day. "The fish bite better when—" "Walter," Billy shouted. "Just say the words." Walter shrugged. "Whatever you say, boss. The dark night is coming quickly. Who am I to argue with the keeper of the mysterious bat creature?" Billy raised a finger. "Listen, the bat creature is—" Mom burst out of the house and ran towards the car. "Why can't I find a pen when I need one?" When she jumped into the driver's seat, Billy got in beside her. He looked at Walter, and she pointed at him. "Say it again quickly." Say it again." Walter rolled his eyes. A dark night is coming quickly. After one successful grind of the ignition, the beetle roared to life. As it puttered, Billy exhaled. Good. One worry out of the way. He looked at Walter and softened his tone. That's perfect. Now remember, stay out of sight unless my dad comes. As the car screeched backward down the driveway, Walter rolled the bike to the hedge at the corner of the house and pushed it in among the bushes. He crouched in mulch and watched the antique yellow bug putter away. How could a bat creature be nothing to worry about? What did Billy know about it anyway? Was the person the creature carried in? Was he the person the creature carried into the clouds? That would explain how he showed up at home so quick. But how did Bonnie get there? The whole situation was getting way too weird to believe. A roaring engine speared his thoughts. A dark blue Cadillac thundered from the direction the Volkswagen had gone and squealed to a stop in front of Billy's house. The rear door flew open. A tall man and a short, stocky woman jumped out. Dr. Whittier squinted at the driver. Dr. Whittier? He scrunched lower and peeked between the leaves. It looked like things were about to get even weirder. Dr. Whittier shouted as he slung his door open. Break the door down if you have to. If they're not home, Sam, check with Olga. She knows what to look for. The pair ran towards the door. Dr. Whittier limped behind them, his cane digging into the grass as he struggled to catch up. Olga jiggled the doorknob, then thrust the end of a crowbar into the jamb, braced her foot against the side panel, and ripped the door open. When the two goons rushed inside, Dr. Whittier scanned the yard, then the roof. Walter hunched lower. Weird had turned into dangerous. A minute or so later, Sam returned carrying a crowbar and a piece of paper. Here's a note, he said, extending it to Dr. Whittier. What do you make of it? Is this tea any cooler? I think it's still hot. What do you make of it? Dr. Whittier took the scrap and read it out loud. Jared, the little bird is here, and the black hawk pursues. Hurry and fly away with us. He crumpled the note and stuffed it into his pocket. Lousy code. Couldn't fool anyone. Bannister's a pilot, so they must be going to meet him. He looked at the road. Was that a yellow Volkswagen we passed? Sam nodded. Female driver. I didn't notice anyone else. If the mongrels were in there, they were hiding. Dr. Whittier took the crowbar and slapped his open palm with it. I'm going to the airport. Finish the search, then burn the house to the ground. I don't want one stick of this house to curse this land. We'll meet. His voice dropped to a whisper. Try as he might, Walter couldn't hear the rest of the conversation. But he heard enough. Big trouble was brewing, and he could only watch and wait. Sam popped open the Cadillac's trunk, pulled out a plastic gas can, and hurried towards the house, one shoulder sagging under the weight of his load. Dr. Whittier closed the trunk and took another quick look around, then limped back to his car. Seconds later, tires spun, a high-pitched squeal, leaving the puff of gray smoke behind as the car roared down the street. Guessing that the pair of goons might come out of the house at any minute, Walter stayed low. What was he getting into? Burn the house down? And here he sat right next to it. His heart pounded. He tried to slow his breathing to compensate. If not for the cool breeze, he would have broken into a sweat. Soon, the odor of something burning drifted by, getting stronger and stronger by the second. Over his head, a swirl of smoke seeped under the window's bottom edge. A moment later, the front door banged open. Sam and Olga hurried out, then halted and stared at the street. Mr. Bannister's beige pickup truck had just turned onto the road about 100 feet away. Walter grinned. Now things would get even more interesting. Sam and Olga hurried across the grass and onto the sidewalk, apparently pretending they were just walking by. The pickup skidded to a stop at the curb. Mr. Bannister jumped out and ran towards them, calling, "What were you doing in my house?" Olga pulled a handgun from under her jacket. With a hyper-quick thrust, Mr. Bannister kicked her wrist, sending the pistol skidding on the sidewalk. When Olga lunged for it, Mr. Bannister bolted toward the house. After swooping up her pistol, Olga charged after him, with Sam following close behind. The house belched smoke from under the front door. Mr. Bannister swung it open and vanished into the cloud. His pursuers dashed in only seconds behind him. Sam first, then Olga, both waving their arms to clear the air. Smoke poured over Walter, covering him and then choking him with fumes. Coughing, he staggered from the bushes towards the street. The sound of someone else coughing made him turn back. Billy's father had run outside. He leaned over and hacked with dry retch spasms, sucking in air after every cough. In his arms he carried a wriggling cat. Gandalf broke free and took off like a furry-tailed fireball into the next yard. Since neither Sam nor Olga were anywhere in sight, Walter ran to Mr. Bannister. "Are you all right?" He raised a hand and coughed several more times before choking out a reply. "I clubbed the first one with a baseball bat. I kept near the door. It was so smoky the second one couldn't see what happened, so I bashed her too." "Where are they now?" Mr. Bannister nodded toward the house. "The second one grabbed me on her way down. We rolled into the fire. Her clothes caught. So did my shirt." He held up his arm, half covered with a scorched sleeve. "When she finally let go, I got away. Her body was already burnt up. The flames were everywhere. It was all I could do to get out." A siren wailed. Walter turned towards the sound. "Fire truck's coming. I guess somebody called 911. Mr. Bannister set a hand on Walter's shoulder. Both watched the house as flames shot through the roof. "The VW's gone, so Marilyn couldn't have been home. Have you seen her?" Walter looked at him. How could he act so calm? His house burned like a doomsday inferno, and a creepy lady with a gun had tried to kill him. Now he was acting like he'd just had a bad day at the office. "I saw them. She and Billy both left a while ago." Mr. Bannister glanced upward. "Thank the Maker," he said, before returning his gaze back to Walter. "Billy was home? Is school out?" "Sort of. Billy asked me to tell you something, so I'd better tell you now." "Okay, what is it?" Walter quoted his part slowly and carefully. "A dark night is coming quickly." Mr. Bannister's forehead wrinkled. "A dark night? That doesn't make sense. There's a full moon tonight." Walter shrugged. "I know, that's what I told Billy, but he seemed to think that you'd know what it means." Mr. Bannister tapped his shoe on the ground, and his brow lifted. Did he mean a dark N-I-G-H-T? Or a dark K-N-I-G-H-T? Walter shrugged again. "I don't know. He didn't spell it." Mr. Bannister rubbed his chin. "What else did he say?" "Just that they were going to the airport. You're supposed to meet them there." 2 fire engines blared their sirens as they careened into the neighborhood block. The pumper stopped behind Mr. Bannister's truck, and 4 uniformed men spilled out, grabbing equipment and unraveling hoses. One firefighter ran up to Walter and Mr. Bannister. "Is everyone out?" "No," Mr. Bannister said. "The 2 who set the fire are trapped inside. I think they're dead." The firefighter rushed back to the truck. "We've got 2 on the skewer." He grabbed a gas mask and raced towards the door, the 2 others with masks following. Mr. Bannister set his hands on Walter's shoulders. "Thank you for the message, but you'd better get home. Those 2 were looking for trouble, and I don't want you here if any others show up." "Sure, but there's one more thing you should know." "What's that?" "Our principal, Dr. Whittier, was with them. I think he was going to the airport to catch up with Mrs. Bannister and Billy and Bonnie, and he's the one who ordered the house burned down." "Bonnie? Who's Bonnie?" Walter opened his mouth to answer, but Mr. Bannister waved a hand. "Never mind. I have to go." He ran to his pickup truck, shouting, "Get home, Walter, and if you can come back with your dad and find Gandalf, I'd appreciate it. I'm pretty sure I left my cell phone at the airport, so you can't call me until I get there." He threw open the door and started the engine and roared away. Walter stared at the scene around him. A house he knew so well crackled in flames, and firefighters scrambled from place to place, two anchoring a gushing hose that rained water onto the roof. 3 women approached from the other houses and watched, while several young teenagers congregated in the street, apparently arriving after their early release from school. The crowd gathered around Walter and pelted him with questions. He answered as many as he could, but he had to keep some things secret, hoping Billy would make everything clear later. After a few minutes, the crowd dispersed, giving Walter a chance to muse about the excitement. A bat creature at school, burglars with guns, and a house fire. What a day. Alright, that's the end of Chapter 8. Let's see. 20, yeah, this is... I need to stop here then, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Oh.